On the 13th morning, a nurse walked into my room carrying a plastic grocery bag. She smiled awkwardly. "I know this isn't hospital policy, but someone downstairs thought you might need these." Inside the bag, a clean shirt, a pair of jeans, sneakers, a toothbrush, travel-sized shampoo, even a phone charger. I looked up. "My family dropped them off?" She hesitated. "No, the cafeteria manager." I frowned. "The cafeteria manager?" She nodded. "He noticed you've been wearing the same hospital gown every day. He figured someone should help." I stared at the bag for a long time. A man whose last name I didn't even know had noticed I needed clean clothes. My own wife hadn't. An hour later, the discharge coordinator rolled a wheelchair into my room. "Ready to head home, I suppose." She handed me the release papers, then asked, "Who'll be helping you once you get there?" I answered honestly, "I'll find out." She smiled politely. People smile differently when they think you're joking. She was. I wasn't. "My name is Adrian Mercer. I'm 68 years old. 13 days earlier, surgeons stopped my heart for almost 4 hours. When they started it again, they told me I'd been given another chance at life. Funny thing about second chances, sometimes they don't show you who's loyal, they show you who was already gone." Before surgery, my wife, Linda, had cried in the hospital parking lot. She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "Don't scare me like this. I'll be here every day." Our son, Eric, squeezed my shoulder. "We'll take turns. Our schedules are already worked out." My daughter, Hannah, even laughed. "You'll probably get sick of seeing us." Everyone sounded convincing because lies are easiest to believe when they're wrapped in confidence. The first evening passed quietly, then the second, then the fifth. By the 7th day, the nurses stopped asking when my visitors would arrive. Instead, they simply pulled up an extra chair while changing my dressings. One nurse stayed after her shift ended, not because she had to, because she didn't want me eating dinner alone. She told me stories about her 2 little boys. I told her about restoring old motorcycles in my garage. For 40 minutes, neither of us mentioned my family. We didn't need to. The empty chair beside my bed said enough. By the 10th day, the entire cardiac ward knew me, not as the man recovering from surgery, as the man nobody came to see. The volunteers remembered my coffee order. The night security guard stopped in every evening just to ask how I was feeling. Even the pharmacy technician brought me crossword puzzles. Complete strangers quietly became the support system my own family had promised to be. Then something happened on day 12, not in my room, downstairs. I was taking my first slow walk around the hospital corridor when I passed the main reception desk. A woman at the counter was arguing with the receptionist. "I already told you, I'm his wife." The receptionist typed something, then frowned. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Our records show no one has checked in to visit Mr. Adrian Mercer." Linda laughed nervously. "Well, I've been busy. I just wanted to see if he's still here." "Still here, not... How is he? Not... Can I see him? Just still here." I stepped backward before she noticed me. She never looked up. She never realized her husband had heard every word. I quietly returned to my room, sat beside the window, and for the first time in 13 days, I stopped wondering why nobody had come. I started wondering what they had been doing instead. I didn't tell the nurses what I'd heard. There wasn't any point. They'd spent nearly 2 weeks trying to protect my feelings. I wasn't going to make them carry my disappointment too. Instead, I asked for a notebook, not because I wanted to write about my surgery. I wanted to remember every day, every hour, every excuse. Mera has a strange habit. It softens pain. I didn't want this pain softened. Not yet. The next morning I was discharged. The charge nurse insisted on walking me downstairs herself. "You shouldn't be carrying anything. My pride weighs more than this bag." She smiled sadly. When the elevator doors opened, the hospital entrance was crowded. Families hugging loved ones, children running into their grandparents' arms, people holding balloons, flowers, homemade signs. One little girl screamed, "Grandpa's home!" She tackled an old man so hard his walker nearly tipped over. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. Then I looked toward the pickup lane. Look, no car waiting, no familiar face, just taxis coming and going. The cafeteria manager was standing near the coffee kiosk, the same man who'd bought me clean clothes. He walked over carrying a paper cup. "Thought you might need one for the ride." I accepted it. "I don't even know your name." Frank, thank you." He shrugged. My father spent his last week in this hospital. No one should leave alone. He squeezed my shoulder, then went back to work. Some people become family without sharing a single drop of your blood. I called a taxi. The driver loaded my overnight bag into the trunk. Halfway home, he glanced at me in the mirror. "You okay, boss?" I smiled. "Heart surgery." Oof, my wife would have killed me if I drove after that. I looked out the window. I'm sure she would have. I didn't say another word. When the taxi stopped outside my house, something immediately felt wrong. 3 unfamiliar luxury SUVs sat in the driveway. Music drifted from the backyard. Lotta, a barbecue. I checked the address. The driver frowned. "This your place?" "It used to be." I paid him, walked slowly toward the front gate. Every step pulled against the stitches in my chest. Not because of pain, because I already knew nobody had expected me home today. The backyard was full, neighbors, friends, portable speakers, a bartender mixing cocktails beside my swimming pool. Someone had even rented one of those giant inflatable movie screens. My wife stood beside the grill wearing a bright summer dress, lowing, holding a glass of wine, completely healthy, completely relaxed. Our son was flipping steaks. My daughter was decorating dessert trays. Nobody looked worried. Nobody looked exhausted from hospital visits. Nobody even looked like they'd recently had a family emergency. I stood there for almost a minute, invisible, until one of the neighbors turned around. "Adrian?" Every conversation stopped. 40 people looked toward the gate. Linda spun around so quickly she nearly dropped her drink. Her smile disappeared. "You're home? Not, are you okay? Not, thank God. Just, you're home?" Nobody moved. Finally, Eric walked over. "Dad, they discharged you early. I was there 13 days. He rubbed the back of his neck. You thought what?" Linda answered. "They told us recovery would take longer." "No. They told you I'd call before coming home." Silence, because I hadn't. I wanted to see my home exactly as it had been while I was gone. Then I noticed the banner hanging across my back patio. It wasn't for me. It read, "Congratulations, Linda." I looked around. "What are we celebrating?" Linda's face went pale. No one answered. My neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, smiled innocently. "Oh, didn't you know?" The entire yard suddenly became very interested in the grass. Mrs. Alvarez frowned. "I thought Adrian already knew about the travel agency." "Travel agency?" I looked at Linda. "What travel agency?" She swallowed hard. "Our new business. Our?" She couldn't answer. Mrs. Alvarez looked confused. "I thought this whole party was because Linda finally bought the franchise." "Bought? With what money?" I looked at my wife, then my son, then my daughter. 3 identical expressions. Not guilt. Panic, because they'd all just realized something. The surgery hadn't cost me my health. It had accidentally ruined a secret they had spent nearly a year building. And somehow, every piece of it had been built while I was lying in a hospital bed, believing my family was simply too busy to visit. Nobody spoke. Not my wife, not my son, not my daughter, not even the neighbors. The only sound came from burgers burning on the grill. Finally, Linda forced a smile. "Can we go inside?" I shook my head. "No, if everyone here knows, they can hear it too." 40 people suddenly wished they were somewhere else. Mrs. Alvarez quietly picked up her purse. "I think maybe we should." "No." I smiled politely. "You've done nothing wrong. You've actually answered my first question." She looked confused. "What question?" "What my family was too busy doing." I looked back at Linda. "When did you buy a travel agency?" She crossed her arms. "It's an investment." "With what money?" "Our savings." "Our," she hesitated. "Family savings." Interesting choice of words, because I handled every investment in our marriage, every account, every retirement fund, every certificate of deposit. There was no family savings account big enough to buy a business. Not one. Eric finally stepped forward. "Dad, don't do this here." I looked at him. "Where were you on day 5? He blinked. "What?" "My 5th day in the hospital. You told me work was impossible to leave." He didn't answer. I turned toward Hannah. "You?" She looked at the ground. "I was busy." I nodded, then pointed toward the giant inflatable movie screen. "Who rented that?" Silence. "The bartender?" Silence. "The catering?" Nobody answered. I smiled. So apparently, everyone had time, just not 13 minutes for their father. Linda finally lost her patience. "This isn't fair." I laughed. "No? You disappeared into a hospital. We still had lives. Those words landed harder than anything else she'd said, because for 39 years, my life had revolved around theirs. School tuition, soccer tournaments, college fees to down payments, car repairs, wedding expenses, every emergency, every celebration. Somehow, I had always found the time. I slowly walked toward the patio table. A stack of colorful brochures sat beside the cake. Horizon Escape Travel Grand Opening Owner, Linda Lawson. I picked one up, beautiful logo, luxury vacation, international cruises, destination weddings. Then something caught my eye, the office address. It wasn't rented space, it was my downtown commercial building, the one I'd inherited from my father. I looked at Lynn. You moved into my building. She looked uncomfortable. You weren't using it. My tenants were. We asked them to leave. I stared at her. We? Eric answered. It made financial sense. Financial sense. Those two words explained everything. I reached into my overnight bag, pulled out the hospital discharge folder, opened it, not to the medical papers, to a single folded sheet I'd tucked inside 2 nights earlier. A property report. While recovering, I'd finally had time to review assets I'd ignored for years. Something strange had already caught my attention. The building title had been transferred into a family holding company. 8 months earlier, I never remembered signing it. I assumed I'd forgotten. Heart medication makes people doubt themselves. Until now. Now I understood why nobody wanted me asking questions. Because while I was focused on surviving surgery, they were focused on building a business, using property that wasn't theirs. I looked directly at Linda. Where's the lease? She froze. What lease? The one giving your travel agency permission to occupy my building. We're married. That wasn't my question. She didn't answer, because there wasn't one. Then something unexpected happened. One of the guests quietly spoke up. It was Michael, a retired banker I'd known for 20 years. I wondered about that. Everyone turned toward him. He continued carefully. When Linda asked me about commercial financing, she introduced herself as sole owner. He frowned. I assumed Adrian had retired from property management. Linda's face drained of color. Michael wasn't finished. She also mentioned her husband wasn't interested in business anymore. Every head slowly turned toward me. I smiled. That's fascinating, considering I was lying in intensive care that week. For the first time, people stopped looking at me with sympathy. They started looking at my family with suspicion, not because I'd accused them, because they had revealed themselves. Without realizing it, I folded the brochure, placed it back on the table, then quietly said, I've spent 13 days wondering why none of you came. I finally understand. You weren't avoiding the hospital. You were protecting a secret. I looked around the backyard one last time. The music had stopped. The food sat untouched. Even the bartender had quietly stepped away. I've seen everything I needed to see. I turned toward the front gate. Dad, Eric called after me. Where are you going? Without looking back, I answered. To the one place all of you forgot still exists. My office. Because inside that office, locked in a fireproof cabinet, was something no one in my family remembered. Something that didn't require a courtroom, didn't require shouting, didn't require revenge fueled by anger. Only one signature, and after what I'd just discovered, I was finally ready to use it. My office was exactly as I'd left it. Same oak desk, same brass desk lamp, same framed photograph of Denise, and me standing in front of the little house we'd bought with our first mortgage payment. The only thing missing was trust. I unlocked the fireproof cabinet, reached to the very back, and pulled out a thin black binder. Not legal papers, not a will, not divorce documents. Something much more valuable. The original ownership records for every commercial property I'd bought over the last 30 years. Most people thought I was retired. I was from engineering, not from investing. Long before my surgery, I'd quietly built a small real estate company. Warehouses, medical offices, retail buildings, one apartment complex, nothing flashy, just reliable investments. The downtown building where Linda had opened her travel agency was only one piece of it. The company itself wasn't owned by me personally. It was owned by Lawson Property Holdings. And I happened to be the only voting member, no one else, not even my wife. At 9 o'clock Monday morning, I invited the building manager into my office. His name was Curtis. He'd worked for me for 15 years. He looked relieved to see me. "Mr. Lawson, we heard about your surgery. I've been better." He smiled. "It's good to have you back." I placed the brochure from the backyard on his desk. "When did these people move into Suite 400? He looked confused. "About 3 months ago. Who approved the lease?" Curtis frowned. "There wasn't one. I assumed you gave verbal permission. I never did." His face immediately changed. "Oh," then he understood. I asked only one question. "Has a single month's rent ever been paid?" He checked the computer. 30 seconds later, he slowly looked back at me. "No. Utilities? Unpaid. Maintenance? Unpaid. Insurance contribution? Unpaid. Property tax allocation? Unpaid." The travel agency had been operating rent-free inside my building while I was lying in a hospital bed believing my family simply missed me. I closed the file. "Please prepare a standard notice." Curtis nodded. "The 30-day notice?" I shook my head. "No, they're not tenants. They're unauthorized occupants." His eyebrows lifted. "Immediate vacancy. Today." At exactly 11:45, I drove downtown, not to argue, not to yell, to observe. The office looked beautiful. Fresh flowers, luxury furniture, elegant reception desk, a giant illuminated sign behind the receptionist. Horizons Escape travel customers filled the waiting area. Linda stood proudly speaking with a couple booking a Mediterranean cruise. She looked confident, successful, like she'd built everything herself. Then Curtis walked in behind me carrying a clipboard. He handed Linda a single envelope. She smiled politely. "What's this?" "Building management." She opened it casually, halfway through the first page. Her smile disappeared. "What is this?" Curtis answered professionally. "This business is operating without authorization. The building owner has ordered the premises vacated immediately." She laughed nervously. "There must be some misunderstanding." "There isn't." She finally looked toward me, standing quietly near the entrance. "Adrian, you did this?" I answered calmly. "No, I corrected it." Customers had stopped talking. The receptionist looked completely confused. Linda hurried across the lobby. "You can't shut down my business." "I didn't. You built it inside someone else's property without permission." She lowered her voice. "We're married, I know. That doesn't create commercial leases." Eric arrived 20 minutes later, breathing hard. "Dad, please, we can fix this." I looked at him. "You had 13 days. He swallowed. "I made a mistake." "No, you made 13 separate decisions. Every morning you chose not to come." He couldn't argue because he knew I was right. Within 48 hours, the office was empty, furniture removed, signs taken down. The travel agency never reopened. Not because I destroyed it, because every supplier discovered it had never legally occupied the premises. Every partnership disappeared. Every reservation was transferred elsewhere. Business doesn't survive long when its foundation is borrowed without permission. Linda moved into a condominium across town. Eric rented a small apartment. Hannah stopped calling for several weeks. The silence didn't bother me anymore. I'd already experienced 13 days of it. Anything after that felt familiar. 6 months later, I received an invitation, not from my family. From the cardiac ward. The hospital had started a volunteer visitor program. Their idea was simple. Patients recovering alone would be paired with volunteers who simply sat, talked, played cards, or shared a meal. The coordinator smiled. "A nurse recommended you." I accepted immediately. Every Wednesday afternoon, I visited someone who had no visitors. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we watched baseball, sometimes we sat quietly. The point wasn't conversation, it was presence. I knew exactly how valuable that could be. One rainy afternoon, as I was leaving the hospital, I saw Frank, the cafeteria manager, still carrying his coffee tray. He recognized me instantly. "You look healthier." "I am," he smiled. "Family treating you better?" I thought about the question for a moment, then answered honestly. "I found a better one," he laughed. "I hope so." I looked back toward the cardiac wing. I did. It's full of strangers. But somehow, they never forgot to show up. People think my revenge was closing the travel agency. It wasn't. If revenge had been my goal, I could have waited. Let them pour more money into a business that never legally belonged there. Instead, I simply stopped pretending that love and permission were the same thing. My wife and children ignored me for 13 days after open-heart surgery. That was their decision. My decision came later. I stopped giving people unlimited access to a life they couldn't spare 13 minutes to visit, because the greatest privilege in any family isn't inheriting someone's success. It's being present when they need you most, and once that's gone, no apology can lease it back.